The Mortal Kombat series has given us some of the most iconic moments in gaming history.
This week on Cooking with Scorpion, learn about chopping, tenderizing, chopping, cake decorating, and chopping.
I don't know about you, but nothing pumps my adrenaline more than the Battle of Armageddon. Every fighter, good, evil, relevant, obscure, meat, and everything in between, faced off in a final war for ultimate power. But I've always wondered, how did everyone die during Mortal Kombat's most epic throwdown? In today's video, my goal is to answer that question using footage from both the Armageddon and Mortal Kombat 9 intros. Some deaths are abundantly clear, while others, not so much. To address that issue, I'll either come up with the most likely outcome or just throw in my own headcanon explanations. I also just want to give a huge shout out to VG Suite and Upscaled for providing remastered versions of these two intros. The quality for the one I recorded was abysmal, and these two videos were imperative to help me identify injuries and background characters. Now let's go frame by frame and see who killed who during the Battle of Armageddon. But first,
they would be drawn to battle.
Confirmed deaths.
Let's begin with the irrefutable confirmed deaths as we see them in Mortal Kombat Armageddon and Mortal Kombat 9. Since many of these characters are not easily killed or even defeated for that matter, it is challenging to say some of them are confirmed 100%, but I believe there's plenty of evidence. I'm confirming Li Mei's death based on the opening sequence of Armageddon at the moment the forces of light and darkness meet on the battlegrounds. Hotaru draws first blood, driving his Naginata through Li Mei's abdomen, and she is never seen again. Until MK9 that is, where she can still be seen with the Naginata plunged into her. Pour one out for Li Mei, who didn't deserve to be the first casualty, but someone had to take the L. The next confirmed death is slightly less convincing, but just work with me here. After famously socking Melina, Stryker ascends the steps but doesn't stand a chance against Kano's cybernetic eye. Or does he? When analyzing this sequence, Stryker lays motionless after Kano's attack, but then recovers and continues ascending the stairs. I think the fatal blow occurs at the hands of Shang Tsung, who hurls a flaming skull at a group of fighters beneath him on the steps, one of which is Stryker. A combination of Kano lasering his chest, paired with a skull explosion and subsequent fall from the pyramid, is enough to convince me of Stryker's demise.
Spread 'em!
So long, Stryker. You fought the good fight. The once protector of Queen Sindel and eventual queen of the Shao Kahn herself, Sheeva, perishes third, and this one is indisputable in my opinion. After effing up Rai Cho for puking all over the stairs, Sheeva takes a Nightwolf arrow to the back before Cyrax queues up for a piggyback ride. She quickly shakes that off and she figures to best Ermac and Nightwolf in a 1v2 situation. However, Kenshi spoils this attempt by driving his sword directly through her chest. He then finishes her off with a slash across the back just for good measure. Despite having a pair of extra appendages, Sheeva could have used more in this situation, as her death is later confirmed in MK9, with Nightwolf's arrow still lodged in her. The next death that occurred in Armageddon was Kenshi. He lost his life not long after putting Sheeva 6 feet under. Kenshi and Quan Chi went toe-to-toe in a pretty decent little one-on-one battle. Unfortunately for the blind swordsman, Quan Chi proved that 2 swords are better than 1, driving one of his directly into Kenshi. For good measure, Ermac comes out of nowhere and double chest stomps onto Kenshi before revealing himself to be Shang Tsung. In the ensuing scenes, he lies motionless before MK9 confirms his death on the pyramid steps. This one is just not debatable. Kenshi saw more than any of us could, but contending with the pyramid's treacherous layout and countless adversaries, he lost his life to a conniving sorcerer. 2 conniving sorcerers. The final death shown in Armageddon, at least in my opinion, is that of Shang Tsung. He arguably should have reached the top after finessing Shao Kahn. But little did he know, a relic from his past would come back for vengeance.
Will be revived.
Zombie Liu Kang arrives on the scene and the crowd goes wild. He throws down with the man who ended his life, but Shang momentarily wins the scuffle, beating ZLK down the steps before doing the same with Melina and Shujinko. Just before Shang reaches the top, Liu Kang snags him with both hooks as he rapidly ages.
At last, it has come to this final battle. Armageddon has begun.
MK9 later confirms his death just before the top of the pyramid. But how did he die? The logical answer here is that Liu Kang was the one who ended him. But you can also see Shinnok and Scorpion ascending the steps just before the intro ends. They could have been involved in some way, but I'm sticking with the Liu Kang theory. Shang Tsung entered the afterlife, not expecting an old grudge to be his downfall, falling short of Blaze and reverting to his elderly form in the process, mere steps away from absolute power. Now let's time jump from 2006 to 2011 for the conclusion of this battle. Right off the rip, we see Kung Lao was pieced up by Shinnok. It's unclear if this is what did him in, but it's a safe assumption. Jumping back to Armageddon, we see Kung Lao battling Baraka briefly, who we'll get to shortly, and that's the last time we see him in the previous game. That unfortunately means that we can only speculate about his cause of death, but given Shinnok's status as a fallen god, I submit that he caused Kung Lao's death sometime after he fought Baraka. He uses this same attack on Raiden as well. And don't worry, death to Kung Lao is nothing new in this series. We could comfortably say that he succumbed to Shinnok's suffocating skeletal hands in this case. Kitana is the second deceased character we see in the MK9 opening cinematic, right beside Kung Lao, but there is no information to go on apart from some blood on her arm. Stepping back to the Armageddon intro, the Edenian princess can be seen schooling Kano in a fight before Kintaro yeets her out of the frame. She fights Reptile later, who she has some history with dating back to MK3. After that, this might be her ascending the steps just before the intro ends. Although we know that she's dead, there's no definitive hit that shuts her lights off, if you will. As we know, the battle continued after the Armageddon intro ended, so I'm putting my expert theoretical analysis to work. I picture Shao Kahn standing atop the pyramid, still fending off the other fighters, one of which was his adopted daughter. Given her proximity to the pyramid in the MK9 intro, I think Shao Kahn battered her with his Wrath Hammer, and that put her away, potentially with some involvement by Mileena, since she was imitating Kitana based on her Armageddon bio. I'd be open to your interpretation of this one, so let me know in the comments. But wait, what about Kitana's MKX ending, where she has a vision of an alternate timeline where she survived Armageddon? Ah, whatever.
I'm here to tell you right now. We don't care. Ah ha ha ha.
Next up, we see our beloved undead Sektor Scorpion has died. Now, with Sub-Zero's Cory blade buried in him, that's the most convenient explanation, which also works from a storyline perspective because of their extensive history.
By defeating you, Sub-Zero, I have avenged the death of my family and clan. Now my soul can finally rest.
Your soul will never rest, Scorpion. The Lin Kuei may have been responsible for your murder, but your family's true killer still remains free.
Although I will say that Scorpion and Sub-Zero's feud had almost zero development from MK4 up until this fight. In the Armageddon intro, he scraps with Sub-Zero often, and is last seen running up the pyramid steps alongside Shinnok. How he ended up all the way back here is just unknown, but perhaps Shinnok, Blaze, or Shao Kahn sent him back to the ground, where he and Sub-Zero continued their fight before succumbing to the many wounds suffered during the fight. It's a poetic ending for Scorpion, whose story has always been intertwined with his bitter rival. It may not be the most exciting explanation, but it's the only one I'll accept. On the same screen, we see Hotaru, who was previously seen driving his Naginata into Li Mei. He had his comeuppance sometime after achieving the first confirmed elimination. Unfortunately, there are no indications of how he perished or even any visible wounds. In the Armageddon intro, he is shown only fighting Sub-Zero. Given his well-documented history with Sub-Zero and his proximity to Scorpion, I theorize that Sub-Zero ended him. Hotaru's Deception bio states that his mission is to hunt down Sub-Zero for what he's done to the Tarkatan race. Combining this bio with him fighting Sub-Zero in the Armageddon intro and another aspect we'll get into in Sub-Zero's death, the pieces start to come together. Although there's no spine rip in sight, I believe Sub-Zero mortally wounded Hotaru before doing the same to Scorpion. Speaking of the Tarkatan race, the leader of the Tarkatan army is on the next screen in what is arguably the most iconic death shown in Mortal Kombat 9's opening sequence. Not only that, but it's unquestionably the most definitive death of the entire battle. Cut and dry, pun intended, Baraka's death came at the hands, the brim of Kung Lao's hat. After the two were seen throwing down in the Armageddon opener, both on the ground and somehow mid-air, Kung Lao showcased more than just his razor-sharp wit.
It is a battle of blades.
My hat's blade has greater range.
But you only have one.
His iconic hat met Baraka's iconic face in devastating fashion, splitting the Tarkatan's head in half, ensuring it would be the final headache he'd ever suffer. Also, I spotted Shao Kahn absolutely walloping Baraka off the stairs. Just had to mention that. You had a solid run, Baraka, and thank you for giving us this iconic imagery. With 2 suspected kills to his credit, Sub-Zero's body count was not enough for him to survive this incredible battle of epic proportions. In MK9, we see him clearly not alive. And there's a Hotaru connection from earlier. Considering Hotaru's personal motivations, I believe he and Baraka teamed up on Sub-Zero, which explains why Baraka's severed arm with blade is stuck in him. That's kind of a lame way for Sub-Zero to go, but I think there's a more intricate explanation here. So he fights Scorpion and Hotaru, but eventually reaches the pyramid. While running up the steps, he is one of many fighters to be on the receiving end of Shang Tsung's Flaming Skull blast. This launched him back down to where the battle began, where he squared off against Hotaru and Baraka. He sustained various injuries, but ultimately ended Hotaru. After Baraka stabbed his arm blade into him, he severed his arm but succumbed to his many wounds, and maybe even Scorpion was involved in some fashion. Sub-Zero showed he was cold as ice as he took down one of the most beloved characters in Mortal Kombat history and Scorpion. But even he could not survive this intense brawl. Next, we have another one of the most beloved characters in Mortal Kombat history, Hsu Hao. You know him and you love him despite the developers' unnecessary hatred. He somehow returned in Armageddon after Jax removed his cybernetic heart 2 games prior, presumably thanks to Shinnok.
Fast as fuck, boy.
I was actually surprised at how much screen time he got in the Armageddon opener. He wheel kicks Kenshi and spends most of his time fighting him before the pyramid emerges. Of all the fighters in the game, Hsu Hao somehow made it further up the steps than anyone would have expected. He fights Johnny Cage, who inexplicably pulls him off screen just before Shang Tsung's Flaming Skull. What confuses me the most is how these two made it all the way back here when they were clearly nowhere near this area last we saw them in Armageddon. I suppose it's possible that they were both blasted by Shang Tsung's attack, or maybe fell victim to Shao Kahn's Wrath Hammer. Either way, they somehow made it from here to here. Hsu Hao appears beside Johnny in the MK9 opener, with really no one else around apart from this person who I can't quite identify. So how did he die? Occam's razor suggests that Johnny Cage finished what he started on the pyramid. The only other explanation I can conjure up is that maybe Jax finished what he started at the end of Deadly Alliance. There are no visible wounds or blood on Hsu Hao, and it couldn't have been Kenshi since he died while Cage and Hsu Hao were fighting. My official theory is that either Johnny Cage or Jax was responsible for his death, either by ripping out his cybernetic heart again, an otherworldly nut punch, or just by developer hatred. Because we all know that the devs hate this character. Besides Hsu Hao is the severed head of Hollywood's own Johnny Cage. Right off the rip, there's no shot that I'm attributing this death to Hsu Hao, because in no world or timeline would that happen. Please allow me to galaxy brain the potential cause of death because I think my speculation works on many different levels. In the lead up to Mortal Kombat Armageddon, Johnny Cage became one of the most important characters from a lore perspective. Although Midway never completed the bios, a few, including Johnny's, mentioned that he's had visions of Shinnok returning from his defeat years ago. He witnessed the fallen Elder God ordering Quan Chi to gather the forces of darkness to retake Shao Kahn's fortress in Outworld. He even shadow-kicked Shinnok before he could escape. This may be a reach, but the only plausible cause of death I have for Johnny is that Shinnok was culpable.
Lord Shinnok to you.
He definitely had motive as Johnny uncovered his plot to rally the forces of darkness. I know this may not align with the fact that Shinnok is seen ascending the pyramid steps not long after, but I feel there was enough time to remove Johnny's head before he got to this point. Or maybe it happened later. Also, to take that one step further, there is speculation that the Shinnok present in the Battle of Armageddon was not the real Shinnok, but instead a double or a clone.
You did not kill me at the pyramid. This time I will.
It's possible that the real Shinnok showed up at some point and ended Johnny before retreating. He is later seen developing an evil plot with Quan Chi at the end of MK9. As we know, Johnny would later defeat Shinnok to bring this fantasy booking storyline full circle. Oh yeah, Shao Kahn also annihilated Johnny with his hammer. No matter how you look at it, Johnny fought valiantly but couldn't get ahead of his competition. Like Baraka and Johnny, Sonya had one of the most brutal fates. She was inexplicably split in half at the waist, as shown in the MK9 opener, and those birds are just feasting. Referring back to the Armageddon opener, she fought Frost before her future husband Johnny rudely shoved her off the pyramid. Again, the obvious questions here are as follows. How did she end up back here? I didn't see her in the mix of fighters blasted by Shang Tsung or Shao Kahn, so there's not much explanation there. The more important question is, who split her in half? I believe there are two viable possibilities. The first is that Kano got the better of her and ended her in the most brutal manner possible. The brutality of her death seems personal to me, so Kano is a likely perpetrator in Sonya's death. The other theory is that Sektor was responsible. And hear me out on this one. Sonya was one of the few characters with an actual bio in Armageddon, which explains that she and Jax were hunting down a cyber ninja faction called the Takunin. Led by Sektor, the Special Forces identified this group as a legitimate threat to civilization. This feud even reached the point where the Takunin captured Jax, and Sonya wasn't sure if he was alive or dead. If not Kano, Sektor had a motive to eliminate Sonya Blade with his own pulse blades, especially after she helped Taven defeat the Takunin in the conquest mode.
Takunin warship, this is Sonya Blade. You are in violation of the Earthrealm Accord. Surrender immediately or risk annihilation.
Both of these theories are viable, and regardless of which one you subscribe to, it was likely that a Blade, or two, were Sonya's downfall. After witnessing the aftermath of Sonya's brutal demise, the scene transitions and brings us closer to the pyramid. The first confirmed death here is the forever jobber, Reptile.
What is this?
He falls under the no visible wounds category, instead just lying dead on the battlefield. Teleporting back to the MK Armageddon opening, Reptile is shown fighting Kai for whatever reason, and Kitana as I mentioned in her segment. Unfortunately, your guess is as good as mine on this one. I don't think it would have been Kai, and it feels like the most logical explanation is that Kitana killed him based on their history and consistent fighting. With Reptile being Shao Kahn's dedicated servant, Kitana has the motive. Another possibility is that Chameleon exacted vengeance on Reptile for betraying the Zaterran race by serving Shao Kahn. No matter the cause, Syzoth once again proved himself inferior from a story standpoint, a trend that's become too common. Justice for Reptile. Beside Reptile is Noob Saibot, fresh off his parasitic partnership with Smoke. Unlike the Zaterran, we have a potential cause of death here. We see Noob with a sword in his chest. Is anyone else noticing a trend? Anyway, this instantly narrows down the list of fighters who killed Noob. The only character he fights in the Armageddon opener is Ashura, with whom Bi-Han has history. However, this sword is clearly not Ashura's, so that rules her out. That leaves a few possibilities, but I think there is one obvious answer, and that's Scorpion. Bi-Han and Hanzo have history, to say the least. And this looks similar to the sword Scorpion uses in Armageddon. Okay, maybe not an exact copy, but it can't be Kenshi, and his sword is the only other one that looks similar to this one. Listen, if MK9 could take liberties with the costumes, I'm willing to accept that the same happened with some of the weapons. I envision Scorpion impaling Noob before fighting Kuai Liang, who ultimately ended him, proving that Noob is a real noob. Noob Saibot also gets smashed by Shao Kahn, but I'm honestly not sure where that fits into my narrative, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. Next, we move to Queen Sindel, who appears for a brief moment before the camera moves to the pyramid steps. And you won't believe how she died. I'll give you a few moments to guess. If you predicted that Sindel died of a sword wound, you're starting to catch on. I will just mention before we get into her death that she was one of the many to get blasted off the pyramid by Shang Tsung. She also becomes a victim of Shao Kahn's Wrath Hammer. I'll be honest here, this death is confusing as hell, because it looks like Scorpion's sword, but I don't think it's him. Scorpion just doesn't have a motive, and though the sword does look similar, there's a better explanation. This one goes deep, so bear with me. I theorize that Quan Chi was responsible for Sindel's death during the Battle of Armageddon. While I will admit that Shao Kahn would probably make more sense, Quan Chi uses a sword similar to the one found in Sindel to kill Kenshi on the pyramid steps. Digging deeper into this feud, we know that Shinnok and Quan Chi invaded Edenia with Tanya's help back in MK4. Both also had some culpability in reviving Sindel after she took her own life to escape her forced marriage to Shao Kahn. We also learn in MK9 that the storyline retconned her death from a self-elimination to Quan Chi being accountable.
Tell me something only Sindel would know.
Quan Chi murdered me right under your nose.
You lie, imposter!
Perhaps this opening was a way to indicate Quan Chi would become more involved in Sindel's backstory than in the previous timeline. I firmly believe that Quan Chi eliminated Sindel before making his way up the pyramid steps, but this would had to have happened after Shang Tsung lifted him off the stairs and after the skull explosion. So take that for what you will, ensuring that the Queen screamed her final scream. Before arriving at the pyramid, Jax is the final identifiable character we see dead in the MK9 opener. Netherrealm made this somewhat easy for us, depicting Jax impaled with a spear. But the list of characters who use an actual spear as their weapon is shorter than you might think. And by that, I mean it's basically just Shao Kahn. At least in this period. During the battle, Jax fights Quan Chi and breaks his leg, but Quan Chi and a spear just doesn't sound right. From a rivalry standpoint, I don't think there's one clear answer for Jax in this scenario, so here are two possible outcomes. Outcome A is that after Shao Kahn battered him with his Wrath Hammer, he eliminated Jax with the spear. This is the likeliest cause of death in my opinion. Outcome B is that Jax's old MK Annihilation nemesis Motaro made an unexpected appearance, dealing the fatal blow. As we know, based on Raiden's pre-MK9 vision, Motaro is no stranger to the spear, seeing as he used one to kill Johnny. Part of me wants to say that Sektor was involved somehow, and in all honesty, he may have been involved. But again, we are only talking about who caused Jax's death, and I think Shao Kahn and or Motaro makes the most sense. Jax was able to snatch a leg with his metal arms, but in the end, one of these two said,
Gotcha!
The first confirmed body we see on the steps is Rai Cho. In the Armageddon intro, we see this drunken master running up the steps only to take a knife in the back by Kano, causing him to vomit. Unfazed by this toxic waste, Sheeva wallops Rai Cho, but that wasn't his undoing. He clearly rebounded after Sheeva punched him, and I'm just gonna theorize that since Shao Kahn was absolutely rocking people left and right, he was the one to take out Rai Cho. Although, I could also see Onaga taking his life since he trained Shujinko, who ultimately defeated him in Deception. Rai Cho shockingly reached the steps, but had a few too many to drink. Ultimately, one of Mortal Kombat's two most threatening boss characters destroyed him. Above Rai Cho is one half of the ketchup and mustard duo, Cyrax. He is seen ascending the steps after Sheeva yeets Rai Cho. He tried to get a piggyback ride up to the top from Sheeva, but she wasn't having it, so she sent him flying. However, he did return to the stairs at some point and appear just beneath where Sheeva perished. With Sektor being just a few steps above him, My headcanon is that these two went to war and either died simultaneously or Sektor got the better of Cyrax. These two have such a storied history that I find it hard to believe they didn't come to blows during the most epic battle in all of Mortal Kombat. Otherwise, I think it's possible that Shao Kahn was once again responsible. He was dealing some serious damage with that hammer, and it's plausible to think that he caught Cyrax off guard and smashed his head. Put me down for a death to either his rival Sektor or Emperor Shao Kahn on this one, proving that Ketchup really is superior. Moving further up the staircase, we see that Nightwolf is the next confirmed dead character, located above Cyrax and slightly beneath Sheeva. Flipping back to Armageddon, Nightwolf's crowning achievement was that arrow he fired into the female Shao Kahn, which is still lodged in her here. Last we saw him in Armageddon, Sheeva kind of just tossed him and Ermac down the stairs, so again, there's not much to go on. I will propose the possibility that Shao Kahn did his hammer thing again, but if we utilize the Galaxy Brain method, I'm nominating Onaga as well. Nightwolf was one of the few characters to have a bio in Armageddon. It turns out that he imprisoned Onaga's soul in the Netherrealm following his defeat at the hands of Shujinko. That sounds like a motive to me, and although we don't see Onaga attack anyone else apart from Shao Kahn, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I envision Onaga snatching Nightwolf after Sheeva pushed him down the stairs and smashing him off the steps until that was all she wrote. I'm not seeing any flesh wounds, so the blood behind him leads me to believe he suffered repeated trauma to his back. Nightwolf put forth a valiant effort, but ultimately, Onaga said night-night to Nightwolf. Past Nightwolf and Sheeva, we see Kabal lying deceased beside a few other combatants, with one of these creepy birds feasting on his corpse. Representing the forces of darkness, Kabal appears a few times during the battle, running awkwardly with his hook swords, fighting Ermac, dashing up the stairs, and then getting wrecked by Stryker. Shao Kahn later punches him in the face, and that's the last time we see Kabal in Armageddon. Now for how he died, and I'll just start by saying he looks like he's in rough shape. Part of me wants to say that Mavado contributed to this outcome, but there's no chance Mavado is besting Kabal twice in one timeline. My theory is that Taven did the deed, and here's why. Taven was the original winner of Armageddon before MK9 screwed everything up, so he had to be responsible for at least some of these deaths. Connecting this to the Armageddon Conquest mode, we know Taven and Kabal had a run-in, and I don't see any other conflicts for Kabal that would make sense apart from Mavado. I could see maybe Kenshi getting into it with Kabal, but this is my headcanon and pure speculation. Put me down for Taven driving the Drake Sword through Kabal and ending his bid to defeat Blaze. Beside Kabal on the pyramid stairs is another cybernetic ninja who made a strong effort but didn't quite make it, and that's Sektor, of course. Despite barely appearing in the MK Armageddon opener, I honestly couldn't find him at all, Sektor somehow made it into the mix of fighters we actually see on the pyramid, so this one's tough to pin down. I'm almost inclined to say that he and Cyrax battled to the death, and they canceled each other out. We have two cybernetic ninjas with a storied history on opposite sides of morality. As I said in Cyrax's segment, it's hard for me to believe that these two didn't meet one another on the pyramid, especially given their proximity to each other. So, Theory A is that Sektor got the better of Cyrax but ultimately succumbed to whatever wounds he sustained in their fight. Theory B is the possibility that Taven claimed his second life on his way up the pyramid. Based on what we know, Taven did reach the top, but Shao Kahn ultimately made his way back to the pyramid and won. It's conceivable that Taven eliminated Kabal and then Sektor on his way up to the top of the pyramid. Despite emerging the superior cyborg in this scenario, Sektor's unexpected appearance saw him meet his end either by his sworn rival or the original Armageddon victor. But Ketchup is still better. Only 3 more characters stand between us and the top of the pyramid. Who better to continue with than Mileena? She might have the most ambiguous outcome thus far, mainly because last we saw her, Shang Tsung threw her off his shoulders. Thankfully, she's one of the lucky few to get an Armageddon bio. It basically reveals that she pretended to be Kitana while controlling Edenia, only for Shao Kahn, Goro, and Shang Tsung to return and retake control of the realm. She's given the surprisingly easy task of capturing and holding Shujinko captive as a bargaining chip for Onaga. During the battle itself, she fights Nightwolf before Stryker punches her in the face. Now, whoever got a hold of her did some damage based purely on the blood behind her on the stairs, although that doesn't exactly narrow it down. I've already credited her and Shao Kahn with Kitana's death, so Kitana's out. As a result, there are infinite possibilities, but let's try to narrow it down. I think that Shujinko or Liu Kang were responsible for her death, and here's why. Shujinko was punched down the pyramid not long after Mileena was thrown by Shang Tsung. So they could have recovered, met each other on the steps, and that's where Shujinko eliminated her. Liu Kang, on the other hand, had one mission, and that was to avenge his death at the hands of Shang Tsung. Suppose Mileena intervened in his attack on Shang just before the intro ends, and as a mindless zombie would, he brutally dispatched Mileena before finishing what he started with Shang. It's not poetic by any means, but either of these two characters are feasible, and there's always Shao Kahn. Thankfully, her death didn't exclude her from MK9.
Looking for a new playmate.
Because that may not have gone down so well.
A million souls cried out for my return.
I find it interesting that Quan Chi is next in line, and if these two intros haven't made it clear yet, I mean, what the f***? I almost feel robbed of what actually occurred during this battle, seeing as Shang Tsung disguised as Ermac force-lifted his former teammate seemingly off the pyramid. Somehow, he grinded his way back damn near to the top. As a conniving con artist, Quan Chi's list of enemies is a mile long. We already know that all alliances went out the window once the pyramid emerged, meaning we are working with dozens of possibilities. That said, it's pretty easy to narrow down this list based primarily on Quan Chi's location. It's safe to ignore most characters, seeing as only a handful made it to the steps. We can rule out Kenshi since Quan Chi ended him earlier, and I don't see Mileena being responsible for his death. Despite Shang Tsung betraying him, I don't think he would have done it either, so that leaves 3 possibilities: Taven, Raiden, and Shao Kahn. Taven made it to the top of the pyramid at some point if you believe that theory, meaning there's at least some credibility there. Raiden made it all the way to the top and had to eliminate someone along the way, so that seems possible. And we all know that Shao Kahn was putting in work with that hammer. I think that's a possible outcome for Quan Chi as well. I'm leaning towards Shao Kahn because if he could defeat Onaga after being at a disadvantage and still manage to defeat Blaze, he was simply on another level. I think that, like his other victims, he brutalized Quan Chi with his hammer until he couldn't take anymore. That also could play into his deception and eventual betrayal of Kahn in the MK9 story. With only a few steps remaining until we reach the top, we find the legendary zombie Liu Kang between Quan Chi and Shang Tsung. We already addressed and theorized that he took care of Shang Tsung, which begs the question, what ended him? We don't see ZLK fight anyone apart from Shang Tsung, but like Quan Chi, this list is narrow just by process of elimination. Shao Kahn and Raiden are the 2 likeliest characters responsible for zombie Liu Kang's termination. Raiden controls Liu Kang, so his mission is effectively complete after he eliminates Shang. Shao Kahn's reasoning falls under the same ones I've mentioned at least 200 times, and that is that ZLK just became a casualty of Kahn's pursuit of Blaze's power. And there's of course history between these two. However, let's take a trip back to Chapter 11 in the Mortal Kombat 11 story mode. Called Cutting the Strings, this chapter revolves around Raiden and how Shinnok's amulet influences him. Raiden flashes back to a few times him and Liu Kang have gone head to head, including the Battle of Armageddon. where we see a much improved battle from a visual perspective. This sequence also features a flashback specifically to the end of MK9, where Raiden puts an end to Liu Kang. There's an obvious theme in play here, and that leads me to believe that Raiden, not Shao Kahn, was in fact the one responsible for zombie Liu Kang's death. I initially gave the credit to Shao Kahn here, but after stumbling upon this information, I'm giving this death to Raiden. As they say, we wish we knew we were in the good times when they were happening, as ZLK is nothing but a distant, fond memory. Before we get to the complete guesses, we round out the indisputable deaths with Raiden. And this one shouldn't take long. Following the MK9 retcon, the only two left standing atop the pyramid were Shao Kahn and Raiden. As we've seen him do at least 459 times in this video, Kahn put the hammer to work and smashed the Thunder God to pieces. Burning with Blaze's essence, he legitimately slammed Raiden into a new timeline, and that was all she wrote.
He must win.
I will just say that I wish there had been more of an explanation, since we barely saw Raiden after the initial battle between the forces of light and darkness. But I suppose that brief clip in MK11 provided a bit more context. But I digress. He must win.
He must win.
And finally, although we don't see a body, Blaze's ending is quite clear. From a canonical perspective, Taven took the L on this one. Instead, Shao Kahn somehow survived an encounter with Onaga, ventured back to the pyramid, made it to the top, and defeated Blaze to claim his power. I'm still not sure how that happened. I know there's some debate about this, but this post from John Vogel himself confirmed that Taven defeating Blaze was effectively retconned. Despite being a genuine A-tier final boss in my opinion, Blaze was simply no match for Shao Kahn.
Blaze, you weak, pathetic fool.
That's 28 fighters down using as much evidence available to us as possible. Now, let's get to the fighters whose bodies we don't see whatsoever in the MK9 opening cinematic. These breakdowns won't be as detailed because there simply isn't enough information on these fighters. I will come up with my theories, and I'll try to identify the deceased fighters in the MK9 intro as well. Be sure to let me know your theories along the way. Ashura appears a few times during the Armageddon intro, fighting Noob Saibot and later Mavado. Although she's absent from the MK9 intro, I'm inclined to say that Noob Saibot was the one to kill her, since the two definitely have history. Her deception ending indicates that she defeated him, so I'm on board with this theory. So we can comfortably call this an act of revenge. The Sidon warrior Dairu sided with the forces of darkness for this company outing. He encountered police officer Stryker in battle, and later took a flaming skull blast from Shang Tsung alongside several others. I think it's safe to say that this blast mixed with the fall probably did the trick. Darius fights Johnny Cage and Fujin before Shao Kahn smashes him with his hammer. This launches him onto the emerging pyramid before he slides off. Now, I initially thought maybe he fell beneath the pyramid, but he is seen fighting who I believe is Stryker shortly after, but it's hard to say for sure. He falls off screen, and I suppose that could mean Stryker took him out, or just maybe it was Hotaru, who does have history with Darius. Ermac is another character that we don't see die, but I'm pretty sure this is them on the battlegrounds in the MK9 opener. We see plenty of them in the Armageddon intro, fighting Rain from the jump, and beyond that, they make an appearance on the pyramid steps alongside Nightwolf attacking Sheeva. She ultimately drops the pair of them when Kenshi drives his sword through her abdominal area. We pretty much see Ermac just roll off screen before reappearing following Kenshi's death. But as we covered earlier, this is Shang Tsung pretending to be Ermac, even using his telekinetic move. Now, this tells me that Shang Tsung capitalized by taking Ermac's souls and life before attacking Quan Chi and Kenshi. I could easily say that Shao Kahn was responsible, since he helped create Ermac, who is working alongside the forces of light at this point. However, the Shang Tsung theory is more creative, and there's some solid evidence with this one. As if Shang Tsung needed more souls, he got more than enough from Ermac, who closed out this chapter as an unexpected hero.
We are many, we are dead.
Let's move to Frost, who really only has one relevant enemy in her storyline. Kuai Liang. If you aren't aware of this story, Sub-Zero trapped Frost in an ice coffin for betraying him many times over. Taven then freed her in the Armageddon conquest mode, and she was absolutely losing her mind, hallucinating Kuai Liang left and right.
What happened?
You were encased in ice. Who are you?
I am Frost. Where? Sub-Zero?
Sub-Zero? Sub-Zero? Sub-Zero?
I'm also pretty sure this is Frost based on the similar outfit and color scheme.
She kinda bad though. Is that Frost?
And if that's the case, she's close enough to Sub-Zero for this theory to work. In case that wasn't clear, I believe that sometime after fighting Sonya and either before or after Sub-Zero ascended the pyramid steps, he and Frost went at it and she lost her life in the process. Giving this credit to Sonya doesn't work for me, and this is the perfect setting for Frost and Sub-Zero to settle their conflict once and for all.
Sub-Zero?
Only then could she let it go.
Hey there, Elsa. What's up?
Ugh, why does everyone call me that?
The God of Wind, Fujin, is next, who we hadn't seen since Mortal Kombat 4 when he became Earthrealm's new protector. As one of the few characters with a bio in Armageddon, it explains that he has seen a new darkness in Raiden, troubled that he is using Liu Kang's reanimated corpse for destruction. Unfortunately, the bio doesn't give us much to work with, but it does touch on Taven and Dagon, the former of whom he would lose to in the Armageddon conquest mode. He later fights Darius and Mavado before the pyramid emerges. Since there is no body present, this will have to be another story building situation. This was definitely not Darius or Mavado, so they're out. I initially thought that it was Shinnok that took out Fujin, but I'm starting to believe that maybe it was Raiden. The two were definitely not seeing eye to eye at this point in the story, and I'm pretty sure this is Fujin running up the steps at the very end of the Armageddon intro. I think it's fair to say that Fujin eventually reached the top where he and Raiden went one-on-one, with Raiden coming out on top. And what better way to eliminate your godly counterpart than with your own lightning attack, making the God of Wind nothing but dust in the wind. Let's get chaotic with the Cleric of Chaos, Havoc. Although we once again don't have a body on the battlefield, we are still operating under the impression that every fighter died. Kind of. Strangely, Havoc didn't have many enemies during his debut in Deception. He is shown fighting Cyrax, but based on how his story concluded in that game, I think Onaga had a part in Havoc's death, if he didn't do the deed outright, and here's why. Havoc developed a plan to capitalize on Onaga's failure in Deception by consuming his heart. This would allow him to resurrect the dead, an insurmountable power in this universe. It's conceivable to think that Onaga caught wind of these plans, and despite both representing the forces of darkness, I believe the Dragon King eliminated or maybe even consumed Havoc, which would explain the lack of a body. Sounds pretty chaotic to me, which may play right into Havoc's hand, because we know he ain't going anywhere. The green female ninja Jade is another character we see quite a bit in the Armageddon opener, but not in the MK9 opener. However, based on her fight with only Tanya in the Armageddon opener, that's where I'm planting my flag. We know these two have some history dating back to MK4, even if it was somewhat indirect. This essentially functions as the battle of an Edenian versus the cowardly Edenian traitor. As far as how she died, I could see one of Tanya's allies helping her defeat Jade, with Tanya dealing the fatal blow, potentially with her Kobujitsu. Now, whether this happened before or after Tanya gets destroyed by Shang Tsung's attack is unclear. My guess is that she and her mysterious assistant defeated and eliminated Jade before the pyramid even emerged. There were no winners in this 1v1 battle, and despite her dedication to the realm of Edenia, Jade lost her life to her realm's second biggest snake. Much to the surprise of everyone who witnessed the most meme-worthy ending in Mortal Kombat 4.
And somewhere, Jarek?
Jax! I thought you were going to...
Thought I was what? Dead? Like my partner you just tossed off the cliff?
I'm sorry, Jax. Please, don't drop me. Wait, I promise.
Too late, Jarek.
You can't drop me. You have to uphold the law. You have to arrest me. Wait, this is brutality. You can't do it.
Wrong, Jarek. This is not a brutality. This is a fatality.
Jarek survived this fall. Of all characters to get an Armageddon bio, Jarek was one of them. He explains that he was able to lessen the impact of his fall by jabbing his weapon into the side of the cliff. Yeah, you can see the devs were really grasping at straws with this game's gimmick. Anyway, I'm pretty sure this is Jarek based on his gear in Armageddon. Unfortunately, a skinned knee and some superficial wounds does not give us much insight. In Armageddon proper, he fought Sindel and Kai before dying at some point. My theory is the most convenient in this situation, and that is that some combination of Sonya and Jax, potentially both, took Jarek out. We know Jarek's history with the Special Forces, and I'm assuming he's relatively close to Sonya's body based on this image. I could see a scenario where Jarek fought these two and ultimately incapacitated Sonya before Jax performed not a brutality, but a
fatality
on Jarek, putting him away for good this time. From one MK4 debutante to another, Kai is up next in what would be his final appearance to this point in the series. Fighting for the forces of light, Kai's list of enemies is quite short, so this one is a serious wild card. Even more unfortunate is the fact that his Armageddon ending literally says that, and I quote,
"But when Kai looked to the future, he saw nothing."
I could really go anywhere with this one. He does get blown back by the emerging pyramid alongside Jarek, but I don't think that's enough to eliminate him. Perhaps Jarek took him out shortly thereafter, or it could have just been Shao Kahn again, since he was on a rampage and was in the general area of where Kai and Jarek ended up. Yeah, let's just go with that. We've covered Kano in a few instances during this video, primarily with the potential of him slicing Sonya in half in one of the most brutal deaths in the MK9 opener. Now, let's discuss what potentially led to his demise. We see Kitana embarrass him in the Armageddon opener before he lasers Stryker and throws a knife into Rai Cho's back. After that, we see Kano in the collection of fighters blasted by Shang Tsung's flaming skull. With that in mind, it's possible that this was the result of Kano's death, but there's nothing really definitive here, so let's once again utilize the Galaxy Brain method. From a rivalry standpoint, I'm immediately looking at Mavado, Jax, and Sonya. These three characters were Kano's most prominent enemies in the OG timeline. However, I'm ruling Sonya out since I've already theorized that Kano ended her. That leaves Jax and Mavado, and it could go either way in my opinion. Both have reasonable motives, considering Jax's long-running feud, and perhaps he witnessed Kano taking out Sonya.
Kano, you're gonna pay for this.
For Movado, he captured and imprisoned Kano as we see in the Armageddon Conquest mode. I think Kano landed on the battlefield after Shang Tsung's attack. He then took down Sonya, opening the door for Movado to capitalize when his guard was down before destroying him. Otherwise, Jax may have seen what Kano did to Sonya and then slammed him into dust.
Gotcha!
He also could have just died in that Shang Tsung blast. And I suppose that's the likeliest of outcomes. Although Sub-Zero did survive his fall, so it's possible that Kano did as well.
My turn.
Kano's fellow Black Dragon member Kira is up next. She only has a handful of appearances in the original timeline, but since this is Armageddon, she has to be included in the roster. During the battle, she fights Rai Cho and is one of the few characters on screen for Stryker's infamous Sucker Punch. What happens beyond that is unknown. Stryker throws Kabal into her, resulting in a fall down the stairs. With that said, I think there's a parallel to be drawn between her and Cobra, who we'll cover next. The two are prominently featured in each other's Armageddon ending, so that tells me there's a rivalry in play here. As for who took her down, the evidence is non-existent, so I'm willing to say that maybe Cobra fought, defeated, and ended her before heading up the stairs. Another possibility is Taven or Shao Kahn, just out of convenience. Kira feels like perfect fodder for one of these two to destroy before making their way to Blaze. It's not the most exciting theory, but there's not much to go on with Kira.
That was fun!
We've covered Kabal, Kano, and Kira, which means that leaves the final K, Cobra. I'll be honest, this is a similar situation to Kira, but the evidence is at least a bit more compelling here. It's quite simple. He's one of the characters who suffered the Flaming Skull attack by Shang Tsung. Considering he's Cobra, it's fair to assume that this attack plus the fall led to his death. If not, he was probably in a weak enough state where anyone could have caused his death. My guess would be either Shujinko or Taven, the former of which he fights early on. Farewell, Cobra. You aren't as hated as Hsu Hao, but there was no chance you and Blaze would throw down. Also, welcome to the new era. With a pair of hook swords and grappling hooks in hand, Movado is on the battlefield, ideally to avenge his devastating defeat at the hands of Kabal. However, he eventually dies after fighting Kenshi, Johnny Cage, and Ashura. Plain and simple, I'm giving this elimination to Kabal, for no other reason than the storyline leading into this game. Kabal had unquestionably the strongest motive to take down Movado after apparently failing to do so in the previous game. Movado got absolutely wrecked by Shao Kahn, and Kabal followed that up with a poetic hook sword finisher for the thief who stole Kabal's signature weapons earlier in the series. But for now, Movado gets the last laugh. Where some of these are complete guesses, I would say Natara's fate is actually quite clear. I mean, yeah, of course we know she dies, but for whatever reason, she was also part of the group of characters with an actual backstory in this game. The key component here is the Vampirus' desire to destroy the blade known as Datusha. Who wields this blade that can easily vanquish vampires? Ashura. Natara did defeat Ashura in the past, and what better venue to exact vengeance than before the Pyramid of Argus? This one is almost too easy to call. I believe Ashura drove Datusha through Natara, further putting her race in danger of extinction.
Let alone that one would kill you.
Onaga might be the biggest question mark of this entire video. I'm gonna be real here for a second. How the f did he catch Shao Kahn off guard, carry him away, and still manage to lose his life? It's honestly perplexing to even process that, especially considering where he was in Deception. Anyway, I think this one is completely indisputable. Shao Kahn somehow broke free from Onaga, the same rival he eliminated eons ago, and history repeated itself. but this time probably without the poison. The exact cause is challenging to figure out, but I'm inclined to believe there was probably a neck snap involved, or perhaps a devastating hammer attack. And I'll just conclude this part by saying the retcon is insane. I have nothing further. The third son of Argus, Rain, is next in line here, but the footage available is limited at best. Thankfully, and say it with me now, he was one of the few characters to have a bio in Armageddon. That's right. It essentially explains his family lineage, particularly that he is the son of Argus and half-brother of Taven and Dagon. That makes him one of the most important characters in this game. Unfortunately, all that information doesn't translate well to the actual battle, but it is worth mentioning that Rain was in the group of fighters blasted by Shang Tsung. This could have done the trick. If not, there are some viable options. I think it begins and ends with Taven and or Dagon. This familial arc plays a sizable role in Rain's Armageddon storyline. Given his desire to end both of his half-brothers before defeating Blaze himself, I'm definitely looking at these two. I think it would have been cool if Rain confronted the two, allowing them to put their differences aside to take him out before finishing their own business. This sounds like a fun moment in theory and something that definitely could have happened, or maybe Shang Tsung's explosion did him in the end. Either way, I'm sure Rain put forth a valiant effort before sinking to the bottom of the pyramid. Also, never forget that Ermac absolutely leveled him at the beginning of the battle. The character formerly known as Discount Shao Kahn, also known as Rai Cho, is next in line on the list of bodies unaccounted for. But I think this one is quite simple. Although his storyline references his hatred for Quan Chi, the credit for Rai Cho's death goes to the Emperor himself. During Khan's hammer tirade, he manages to comically smash Rai Cho twice. I'm not sure if this is the payoff to Rai Cho's MK4 ending, where he's depicted sitting atop a throne while wearing Shao Kahn's helmet, or maybe the funny side plot in the Deception Conquest mode.
I am Rai Cho, General of Shao Kahn's army. What is it you wish to tell me? Oh, Shao Kahn knows about that? Tell him I will no longer enter his chamber or wear his helmet. But just between us, his helmet will belong to me in due time.
But I'm calling it here for Rai Cho. He went back for seconds and got exactly what he deserved.
I am Rai Cho.
Serena, the demon from the Netherrealm, is next in line as the list continues dwindling. Her storyline is expanded upon in her Armageddon bio, explaining her dedication to Kuai Liang. Eager to prove herself worthy of the Lin Kuei, she accepted a challenge to locate the clan's hidden temple. Serena instead followed Sub-Zero to the Netherrealm, where he was ambushed by the tandem of Noob Smoke. She prevented the pair from eliminating him, but as a result of returning to the Netherrealm, she began reverting to her natural demonic form. She ultimately returned to Quan Chi's side, where she'd remain alongside sisters Kia and Jataka until Taven defeated all three of them. Serena then escaped Quan Chi's influence and fought for the forces of light. The two possibilities I see here are Noob and Quan Chi. Both had a reason to seek her out and eliminate her, and I think you can honestly go either way on this one. Both of them have history with Kuai Liang, and destroying a close ally is something either of them would probably do. I'm leaning toward Noob just because they were in the same general area last we see them. Let's just say that this is on brand for Bi-Han. Since we're going in alphabetical order at this point, Shao Kahn would be next. This one's pretty easy. He doesn't die. Unless there's a multiverse situation beyond Kitana's MKX ending, which let's be honest, there probably is. I think at this point in the series, any of the character endings in Armageddon could probably be canon. But for the purposes of this video, the Emperor is safe.
I win.
Next we have Shinnok, and this one also could be pretty easy, but I guess that depends on what theory you subscribe to. I personally am of the mind that Shinnok didn't die during the Battle of Armageddon. I believe the one we see during the battle is either the primary Shinnok until he switches at some point, or it's just a clone / body double. I'm leaning toward the former just because I'm not sure that a body double could compete with Raiden in a one-on-one fight. Anyway, I know nothing has necessarily confirmed this theory, but since Shinnok is such an important character in MKX and even MK11 to an extent, I think there's plenty of merit to this theory. My thought is that this version of Shinnok running alongside Scorpion is actually the body double. This version may have made it to the top and lost to either Shao Kahn, Raiden, or maybe even Blaze. Meanwhile, the real Shinnok was in the Netherrealm moving pieces into place. This would explain why he alerted all of the combatants what was at stake. He wanted this to happen and for the events of MK9 to unfold before he injected himself into the situation. Just listen to this exchange between Dagon and Shinnok and tell me I'm wrong.
He is strong, quite strong, and a skilled warrior.
I told you he was a problem.
He passed all my tests, destroyed my apparitions with ease, more quickly than you did. Perhaps I am aiding the wrong brother.
What? You swore you would help me.
Fool! Your brother has been effectively delayed. His means of teleportation has been eliminated.
Forgive me, Lord Shinnok. I didn't realize. It's just that your aid is vital to my success.
Our success. There is more to this quest than you know. All things have led to this moment. The prize is not merely some gift, as your mother and father would have had you believe. It will determine the fate of many mortals, a fact I will use to my advantage.
I don't understand.
I have informed other warriors of the prize to hasten their participation. They will think, as you did, that godlike power will be bestowed upon the victor. It is a deception. They are marching to their doom. You shall be the victor, and the catalyst to my ascension.
What must I do, Lord Shinnok?
There's also this MKX intro dialogue in the Shinnok mirror match.
You did not kill me at the pyramid. This time, I will.
I'm wondering your thoughts on this, so let me know in the comments, but as far as I'm concerned, Shinnok kind of died, but also kind of didn't.
You question me?
Trust me, he needs all he can get. Shujinko is an interesting case because I previously theorized that he was the one to end Mileena near the top of the pyramid. His bio essentially fills the gap between Deception and Armageddon, picking up after he defeated Onaga. During the battle itself, he fights Cobra and later Tanya, before rushing Shang Tsung toward the end only to be smashed backwards. When Taven encounters him in the Conquest mode, he refers to Shujinko as a quote-unquote foolish old man, after stating his intentions to take on Shao Kahn, Onaga, Shang Tsung, and Quan Chi himself.
Stranger, the key you found. It will unlock my cell door. Please free me.
How do I know you won't attack me?
You have only my word. I am not here to do battle with you. My task is to eliminate Shao Kahn.
Alone? This I must see.
I thank you, stranger. I am Shujinko.
I am Taven. You plan to defeat Shao Kahn? Whole realms have tried to overthrow him.
Not only will I defeat him, but a host of his allies. They are in his chamber now, plotting some coming battle. I allowed myself to be captured. From this dungeon, I can enter Shao Kahn's soul chamber. Once there, I will be able to destroy Shao Kahn and all his allies in one stroke.
Huh?
I suggest you leave quickly, Taven, for I cannot guarantee your safety.
My safety? I just defeated this entire... foolish old man.
I feel that this comfortably narrows the list of possible culprits to either Shao Kahn, Onaga, or maybe Shinnok. After all, we do see Shinnok on screen right at the end of the Armageddon intro, but that could just be the clone. Onaga is a little tougher to make a case for, since he had already carried Shao Kahn away at this point, and would have had to come back to eliminate his old rival. That leaves Shao Kahn, and I hate to do it, but it just seems too easy to pick him at this point. Pairing his backstory leading into the game with his position on the pyramid leads me to believe that Shao Kahn added another body to his body count. Maybe Shujinko should have held on to the Kamidogu.
I have been a fool.
Cybersmoke is back again for this fight, fresh off of a breakup. As we know, Noob Saibot and Smoke joined forces in Deception, but this game plants the seeds of morality for Smoke. This is somewhat apparent since he does fight for the forces of light. Smoke can be seen a few times during the fight, notably battling Natara, who he doesn't really have any relevant history with. There's just one obvious answer here, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this one. It's Noob Saibot because it just has to be. Natara just doesn't fit the bill. Let's say Smoke has found his inner humanity. He would definitely want to have it out with Noob, and I just think Noob won the fight. He clearly had a psychological hold on Smoke, who may have been conflicted with his loyalties until Noob ultimately sent him to the Shadow Realm. Otherwise, this may or may not be Shao Kahn smashing Smoke, which is always plausible in this fight.
Where there is smoke, there is...
Earlier in this video, I theorized that Tanya was the one to bring an end to Jade. Tanya also fights Rai Cho and Shujinko, but who ended Tanya? Well, this may or may not be her at the bottom of the pyramid. It also could be Kira, Serena, or someone else. But she is in the collection of characters that were blasted by Shang Tsung. I'm confident saying that she became yet another victim of the blast mixed with the fall. It's really one of the most significant moments of the battle that was a huge momentum shift for Shang. I can't imagine anyone, apart from Sub-Zero, who looks like he didn't get the worst of the blast, would survive this fall. The only other possibility I see is that Kitana or Sindel dealt the fatal blow after this fall, since these two have strong motivations, especially considering where Sindel's body ended up. Although Sindel was also on the receiving end of Shang's blast, and Kitana probably lost her life to Shao Kahn, as I mentioned earlier, she also fights the emerging pyramid, but definitely loses that one.
Traitor!
That's 52 characters down, which leaves just 11 more. Now that we've covered all of the characters visible during the battle, let's get to the ones that don't appear in the Armageddon intro whatsoever, depending on what you believe. Is this Taven or not? But as you might notice, there are a few fighters missing from this image, so let's fix that through the magic of editing. Only 2 of these characters have at least a somewhat plausible cause of death, and the others, well, let's just say we're gonna have to get creative with those. And in all honesty, there's an argument to be made that some of them didn't die at all, even though that's obviously the vibe presented in the MK9 opener. Beginning with Taven, his fate is pretty clear even though we don't see it happen. The common belief is that Taven made it to the top of the pyramid and fought either Blaze or Shao Kahn, but ultimately died. Just for the purposes of this video, we are going with the actual canonical ending as confirmed in MK9. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Taven was intended to be the winner. That was until MK9 came in and flipped everything upside down. So I think you can make the case that either Shao Kahn or Blaze were the ones to take down Taven. There's just simply no other explanation.
Orin, what happened?
Dagon's fate, on the other hand, is a bit more difficult to determine. Taven does defeat him at the end of the Conquest mode, but he doesn't seem dead here to me, so he may or may not have made it to the battlefield. But this would have occurred after the fight had already begun. Either way, Taven has to be the responsible party in this scenario. It makes the most sense, although I suppose given his ties to the Red Dragon, a Black Dragon member could have done it, or maybe even Rain, but Taven is the answer in my head. And if I had to guess, he probably did it with the Drake sword, because we already know how many swords were involved in this fight. Taven. A pair of fighters that don't appear anywhere in the fight are the sneaky fan favorite duo of Draman and Moloch. Okay, calling Moloch a fan favorite might be a little extreme, although it is fair to say that the developers hate these two characters. Anyway, these two appear briefly in the Conquest mode.
Welcome to hell.
And they're on the roster, but they are nowhere to be found on the battlefield. I have two theories. One is serious and one is a meme. The serious one is that Scorpion got his revenge on Draman and Moloch after the two Oni tossed him into the Solnado. We already know that he survived, but there's probably still some bad blood there. The other is that Draman and Meat just beat each other.
What did he say?
These are two of the most vile characters aesthetically, so this would be a clash for the rancid. And maybe Moloch fought one of the other sub-bosses and ultimately lost his life. Yeah, let's just go with the Scorpion one.
Scorpion wins.
Chameleon cannot be seen during the battle, but I mean, he is a chameleon after all.
Chameleon.
Anyway, this character is truly a mystery. Even his Armageddon ending is as vague as all hell. I'd like to submit that the female chameleon discovered him creeping around the battlegrounds, the two engaged in an invisible fight, and Chameleon came out on top. The female chameleon, that is.
Chameleon.
Chameleon is another one of the few characters not shown whatsoever during the battle. However, if I had to guess, she may have snuck up on Shao Kahn at some point and lost her life. It's the most logical possibility in my opinion, since she has a well-documented hatred for the Emperor following his destruction of the Saurian race. I'm going in a different direction with this next one, grouping Goro, Kentaro, and Motaro into one category. Unless I'm mistaken, we only see Kentaro in the Armageddon opener, whereas Goro and Motaro are nowhere to be found. I'd like to think that with Shao Kahn's newly acquired power, he hosted a battle to the death between these three sub-bosses. The winner of this fight would work alongside Shao Kahn with his new powers to dominate all realms. The three fought valiantly, and Goro was the last one standing. However, feeling that he doesn't need a right hand, Shao Kahn ended him.
Goro, you have fought well, but now you must die.
I just couldn't get past the idea of the three OG sub-bosses brawling for Shao Kahn's acceptance, but ultimately, none would win over the power-hungry Emperor. It's more than likely that we don't see the fan favorite Meat during the battle. But could this be him, or is this just a victim of Reptile's acid bath? I'm not so sure, so let me know your thoughts. A character like Meat almost has zero backstory, and minimal enemies to boot.
Here, take this.
This is a tough call considering he is an underdeveloped character. I'm just not sure how effective of a fighter he is considering he's just an experiment. I could see him wanting to get revenge on Shang Tsung for creating him, only for Shang to easily put him away. An alternate theory that could work is that Natara, as a lover of all things blood, just ate him since he's the physical embodiment of meat and blood. I don't know. I'm open to your theories on this one.
Here, take this.
And finally, we complete this journey with Mocap, another meme character. As we know, with the gimmick of this game, this beautiful tribute to Carlos Pesina had to come back for one last hurrah. That is from a game perspective. What's there to say? He's Mocap. A fun gag and a nice concept, but he has no place in these parts. Literally anyone apart from maybe Meat could have ended Mocap. I'm convinced that Mocap walked onto the battlefield, saw what was happening, and was like, "F that." But if I had to predict who ended him, why not just inflate Shao Kahn's body count more? Or just maybe Johnny Cage recognized Charles Mocap Golden as a threat to his position in Hollywood and utilized the Battle of Armageddon to ensure he would not be usurped as the king of film.
Mocap, you will not usurp me and Hollywood. You must die now.
This is just getting a little crazy.
Mocap
has died. Rest in peace.
And that's it.
I win.
That's what you think, bitch.
A theoretical deep dive and explanation of how every character died in Mortal Kombat Armageddon. Sort of. Now, let's get to the final calculations. And I broke this down by giving a full elimination to any character I believe was solely responsible for another's death. If I was between 2 or 3 fighters, I gave them credit for half an elimination. I'm not going to go through how many eliminations each character had because that would take forever, but feel free to pause here to see how everything shook out. Let's instead cover the top 5. We had 2 characters tied for 4th with 3 eliminations each, and poetically, it's Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Scorpion had 3 full eliminations on Noob Saibot, Draman, and Moloch. Sub-Zero had 3 full eliminations on Scorpion, Hotaru, and Frost. In the bronze position was surprisingly Taven, who I credited with full eliminations on Kabal and Dagon. He also had half eliminations on Sektor, Quan Chi, Kira, Cobra, and Rain. Although I think it's probably fair to put an asterisk next to this one. In the silver position was Shang Tsung, who fully eliminated Stryker, Dairu, Ermac, and Tanya. I also credited him with half eliminations on Kenshi, Cobra, Kano, Rain, and Meat. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, and to absolutely no one's surprise, Hammer Time Shao Kahn ran away with the gold medal. He amassed 11.5 eliminations, including fulls on Kitana, Raiden, Blaze, Onaga, Reiko, Shujinko, and Goro. He had half credits on Jax, Rai Cho, Cyrax, Nightwolf, Melina, Quan Chi, Kai, Kira, and Mocap. Listen, I did my best. I stand by my wish that there was more clarity about how the fight went down. To this day, I still remember watching the intro for the first time and feeling that it would be one of the most legendary moments in the entire series. Sure enough, here we are nearly 20 years later, and NRS is still revisiting this concept. Armageddon represented the end of an era, as Midway would follow this with the polarizing MK vs DC before NRS arrived and gave us the actual conclusion to what occurred atop the pyramid. This was a fun exploration that forced me to learn more about each and every character. I tried my best to make sense of most of them, whereas others were just fun to speculate. If I were to guess, no one involved in the development process has an idea of how most of these characters met their end. That's pretty easy to say with the inconsistencies from the Armageddon intro to the MK9 intro 5 years later. But I suppose not everything needs to be up front and center, and some things are better left to the imagination. I hope you enjoyed the insanity of this video, and I'm curious how you think each of these characters died. Although some are definitely indisputable, the vast majority are up in the air. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many times I've reviewed this fight and the MK9 intro frame by frame, but I'm sure I missed a thing or two. If you made it this far, comment Hammer Time down below, and let's discuss the infinite number of theories floating around. As always, until next time, thanks for watching, and if you ever think of throwing in the towel, remember that Shao Kahn went from this to this.
Don't make me laugh.
Let that marinate, and I'll see you next time.